Hello and a warm welcome to this Independence Day edition of News Now from all of us here at ET Now and the Times Network. A very happy Independence Day to you and your family watching at home. And what a historic day it's been at India's 79th Independence Day. The Prime Minister announcing a series of reforms to the GST regime, promising Indians that the next generation of these reforms would be in by the end of this year. Even as we celebrate good news with regard to the GST reform itself, the Prime Minister has also stood firm on terror, saying that India will quote-unquote strike back at any sign of terror that faces the country. To speak to us especially about the series of GST reforms, I'm joined by none other than Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, chairperson of the Biocon Group. Ms. Shaw, great to have you with us here on ET Now. Truly a momentous day for India with Prime Minister Narendra Modi in a sense, announcing the start of the next-gen GST reform, saying it could well take form and shape by the end of the year. If I could just get your initial reactions, ma'am, to the announcement itself.
Well, I think this is really welcome news, and I think the Prime Minister announcing it on Independence Day, I'm sure, has been very well received by all the citizens of the country. I think GST reforms have been an ask for many, many years now. I think there has to be a rationalization, there has to be a simplification. And I think I'm sure the Prime Minister will really ensure that GST reforms will make a big impact on cost of living, cost of consumption, and I'm sure citizens will hugely benefit from these reforms.
It's been in the reckoning since 2021, since that group of ministers was in fact set up, under Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman as well. And there's been so much talk today about how, especially at this time and place when geopolitical equations keep turning lopsided every other day and there's mounting tariff pressure, that these reforms, rate rationalization, possible a net reduction in overall GST slabs couldn't have come at a possibly better time, ma'am.
Absolutely, and if I look at our own sector, the healthcare sector, the pharmacy sector, pharmaceutical sector, I think we have been constantly asking the government to really relook at the GST impact on the cost of pharmaceuticals, the cost of hospital care, the cost of diagnostics, etc., etc. And I do hope that these GST reforms will make healthcare far cheaper for the common man who has to have a huge out-of-pocket expense. And added to that is a very high GST as well. So I think this is very welcome. And as you said, it's very timely. Every sector, whether it's the hospitality sector, the tourism sector, the consumable sector, I think everyone is asking for a reduction in GST and a rationalization of GST, in every sector.
Absolutely. And Ms. Mazumdar-Shaw, while you speak to us and continue to speak to us about this announcement by the Prime Minister, I request you to continue to stay on. We also have Mr. Rajesh Jejurikar, ED and CEO of Auto and Pharma sector speaking to us about the possible impact of the GST reforms on the auto sector announced by Prime Minister Narendra Modi today. Let's quickly listen in before returning to this conversation.
Well, we'll leave the government to take their decision on what is the right rate of GST for our product category. But the one thing I would say is there's a great opportunity to make automobiles in India for the world. And that opportunity is best leveraged if the size of the Indian market keeps growing faster. And India is still a very under-penetrated auto market. Less than 8 or 9% of the households in India own a car. So there is a huge upside, and the auto industry has a huge GDP multiplier. Is when auto manufacturing goes up, it adds jobs in the supplier ecosystem, it adds jobs in the front end dealer ecosystem. So there is a huge multiplier effect of an auto growth story. And when that auto growth story can create global platforms and global products, because you make more in India for the Indian market as well as export, I think this sector has the greatest ability to create impact on the growth story really. So let's say we hope for the best, but we leave the best decision for that to the top.
So yes, indeed, it is a welcome move, Rajesh. But along with that, what cut do you believe can really boost the affordability?
Yeah, so India is a price-sensitive market, and hence we always try to keep our products well priced. It's also a market in which customers do look for new technologies. So customers are very knowledgeable, very evolved, and if we keep price points affordable, it's going to lead to category growth. So let's hope for the best.
All right, Rajesh Jajurikar there of Mahindra and Mahindra speaking about how GST reforms could mean a net positive impact on the Indian economy and consumption. Ms. Mazumdar-Shaw, if you're still with us, there's been so much talk about the sectors that could possibly be impacted the most by the next gen GST reforms. If you could also tell me a little bit about which sectors do you feel could benefit the most. You mentioned healthcare, but in terms of the biggest advantage and the biggest net gainer in a sense with regard to the reforms itself, there's so much talk about reducing slabs, about closing the lacuna. Which sectors do you feel are in for the biggest upside here?
Well, I think every sector is likely to benefit from GST reforms, and you just heard the auto sector is going to hopefully benefit from the same. I think if you look at it, the consumable sector is hopefully going to benefit. The hospitality sector is hopefully going to benefit, and so on and so forth. I also wanted to make a reference to what the Prime Minister said about investing in research and innovation. And he actually pointed out that although we are the pharmacy of the world, we need to actually invest in research and innovation that actually develops, new medicines that we can take to global markets. And I really welcome that statement because I really believe that we need to leverage the talent pool we have, the disease ecosystem that allows us to, address a lot of unmet needs. And today, with the onset of AI and other digital technologies, we are able to actually create a huge research and innovation ecosystem in pharma that can be globally relevant and globally dominant. And I think for this to really take off the way China has done, I think we need to see regulatory reforms and investment reforms, which actually will then speed up the lab to market journey and get more investment into this research led sector.
Right. Ms. Mazumdar-Shaw, I request you to keep staying with us because we're getting source-based information right now on the new GST reforms. We're hearing that the central government has sent out a proposal to the group of ministers on the new tax structure. We're also being told the central government is proposing prominently two tax slabs in a sense, also recommending that sin goods like tobacco and pan masala come under a 40% tax slab. The proposal has also been sent, like I said, to the group of ministers and states, but two tax slabs. That's the big takeaway that we're getting from sources, close to the finance ministry, with, of course, sin goods being proposed to be brought under a 40% tax slab. We were talking about GST rationalization, simplification of GST slabs, fewer slabs. That's been the discourse throughout the day, Ms. Mazumdar-Shaw, but two tax slabs prominently. That's the recommendation that we're hearing from sources that the center is going with. A big step up, you'd reckon, with regard to the 5-slab GST regime that we've been working with and have been contending with since 2017. What do you think?
I think it's a very, very important step to take because I think it makes a lot of sense to have two slabs. One, as they call it, the sin tax, and the other is the rest of the segments. And I think, I do hope that the second slab is a much, much lower slab. I think anything that is 10 to 12% or thereabouts would be welcome. So I still believe that there needs to also be exemption on many, many segments, like I mentioned, the pharmaceutical segment, especially for cancer drugs, etc. I think any life-saving medicines or chronic therapy drugs do need an exemption from GST. And I do hope that we will see a good rationalization. Yes, 5%, 18% tax slabs are absolutely the right thing to do. And you then have basically a sin tax 40% category, which I think is important as well.
Right. In that same vein, we're also hearing from sources, and this is breaking news just coming in, that the government is also proposing to do away with the 12% and the 28% slab. In fact, a little earlier there was discourse that the 12 and 18% slabs may well be merged into a 15% slab. But the net result of this conversation is that the 12 and 28% slabs could well be done away with, Ms. Mazumdar-Shaw. That's what we're picking up. You feel that would, of course, simplify the whole process, even from a clerical and an accounting point of view. Surely easier times for businesses, for CAs, really, when it comes to going about calculating GST and getting compliance in place, you reckon?
Well, right from the very beginning, I have been one of those advocates of having a very simplified tax slab system. And right from the beginning, I was one of those voices that asked for a simple tax slab, model where we have, at best, a two-slab model. And of course, right now, I would welcome a tax, segment as well. But I think the 5% and 15% sounds very palatable for everyone, I'm sure.
Right. And we're also hearing again from sources, we're getting this information trickling in, that the government is proposing to, bring 99% of items presently taxed under the GST regime to under 5%. Now, this is again source-based information, but massive if it does come to be, given the fact that if we're looking at a net benefit or relief for the Indian taxpayer by way of indirect taxes, bringing in 99% of items under 5% is a massive tax bonanza. In fact, I think a double Diwali bonanza, as the Prime Minister put it, might actually be a bit of an understatement, should 99% items be brought under the 5% category. In fact, Ms. Mazumdar-Shaw, before we come to you on that, let me quickly go to my colleague Prakash Priyadarshi, who's bringing us some of this latest information today. Prakash, what are you picking up? Two tax slabs, that's what we're hearing as far as the next gen GST regime is concerned, and 99% of these items could well be taxed under 5%, Prakash.
Very significant development coming in. We are informing all this information based on our sources, government sources, in fact, and sources are indicating that the process has been initiated. In fact, the central government has sent a proposal to the GST, GOM and the states to consider, where massive reform measures have been proposed. As per the information we are picking up, there'll be essentially two GST slabs going forward if this proposal being accepted by the GST Council going forward. Of course, 5% and 18%, and the center has proposes to do away with the GST slabs of 12% and 28%. A very significant development coming in. There'll be a separate 40% GST slab, which is not part of this two, where only sin goods would be there. That is essentially 5 to 7 items left. And some important items like cement, which is there in 28% slab, will be brought down to 18% slab. But sin goods like tobacco, pan masala and some other products would attract 40% GST. Along with that, one important information that I would like to share with you is, of course, there is no compensation from March 2026. That means there'll be no compensation cess on these items like pan masala and tobacco. It will attract 40% GST after March 2026. So a very significant development coming in. Along with that, we are also learning that 99% of items under 12% slab will come under 5% category. Some products from 28% will come under 18%. The government is planning to expand tax base, provide relief to the taxpayers, industry, MSMEs, farmers, students by reducing GST tax rates going forward. A very significant development coming in the proposal has been sent to the GST GOM, which is already there, along with the states as well. And of course, this proposal is going to be considered in the next GST Council meeting. A very significant development coming in. Along with that, if you look at the overall revenue collection that the government is getting at this point of time under existing GST structure, 11% of the overall revenue, GST revenue, coming from 28% GST slab. 5% from 12%, 7% of the overall revenue coming from 5% GST slab, but most importantly, 67% of the overall GST revenue coming from 18% GST slab, which is still there. So if the government is going ahead with 5% and 18% GST, there'll be no revenue impact. There's no much revenue impact at this point of time, but everything depends on the GST Council. Of course, the GST Council, the apex body to take a final call, but the central government has shown its intent. The Prime Minister has made an announcement from the rampart of the Red Fort that the government is well set to come out with the mega reforms under GST that will be called as 2.0 GST. Back to you.
Absolutely. No, it's a fine balancing act for sure if there is minimal or no revenue impact. But Prakash, very quickly, when is the next GST Council expected to meet in order to deliberate rate rationalizations and go about brainstorming this next-gen GST reforms, so to speak? What is the timeline for that council to meet up next, Prakash?
Yeah, there's no official announcement yet because, of course, after this proposal, GST GOM will have to have a wider discussion going forward. States will have to consider this proposal. Of course, first GST GOM will have to make consensus on this proposal before putting it to the putting it before GST Council. So there is no official confirmation yet, of course, but we are expecting that the next GST Council meeting may take place in the month of September, but the government has to make official announcement. Along with that, if you look at this overall idea behind putting this proposal forward, sources are telling us that the core economic sectors, GST rates on core economic sectors will drastically come down. And if you look at these sectors, I'm putting it forward for our viewers' benefit: agriculture, textiles, fertilizers, renewable energy, automotive sectors, handicraft sectors, health, and of course, health includes medical devices, medicines, insurance premium, health and life insurance both. So the GST rates on these sectors are set to come down. Of course, that will benefit consumers, industry, and other sectors as well. A very significant development coming in. Back to you.
Absolutely. Some very significant developments and an overhaul, in a sense, of the GST regime as we know it this time in place in the works. We'll also look forward, of course, to that GST Council meeting. But in the meanwhile, Prakash, thanks so much for joining us with those very crucial updates with regard to India's next-gen GST regime. My colleague there, Prakash Priyadarshini, joining us with all those updates. Thanks, Prakash. Ms. Mazumdar-Shaw, if you're still with us, you probably heard Prakash there reporting from the corridors of power with regard to this ambitious time, no doubt, for Indian finance and taxation. But very crucial update there, just the fact that 99%, like I was mentioning earlier, of items taxed under the 12% GST slab, the fact that the government proposes to bring them down to the 5% slab, how important is that really, Ms. Mazumdar-Shaw, as far as the Indian taxpayer is concerned? No doubt a massive development there.
I think anything that can be reduced to a 5% level obviously is going to be significantly impactful. But having said that, you heard that 67% of GST is still at the 18% level. So we need to make sure that a lot of that also gets into the 5% bracket. And I would love to see whether the 28% could be reduced to 18%, and largely what the 18% segment has largely comes to the 5%. That would make a huge impact, and that will actually give us the Diwali bonanza. So I think we need to still wait to see what happens. I think there's a lot of data that needs to come out, a lot of information in terms of how they produce, how they intend to rationalize the taxes needs to come out. But until then, let's celebrate this big announcement. Thank you.
Celebrations, no doubt. But if I could just ask you, ma'am, with regard to that 18% point that you mentioned, the fact that the government wants to ensure that it continues to maintain that fine balance in terms of finances and ensure there's no revenue impact, do you feel they would tend more to the position of holding on to that 18% and not doing away with it? Would you reckon that is the thinking by the government?
Well, I think, as I said, they need to look at what comes under the bracket of 18%. And if some of that could be moved on to the 5%, that would be great. But I agree that it is a financial balancing act, and maybe they will have to, hang on to a lot of the items that come under that category. But I would like to see some of that also move to a much lower GST to boost consumption and to actually put more money in the hands of the common man.
All right, let's hope there's a lot more money in the hands of the common man. That's something all of us would so dearly want for this country and its people. Kiran Mazumdar-Shaw, as always, a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for joining us and helping break down these announcements. Thank you very, very much.